Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Jon Brown.
Is this rolling? Economists like to talk about this thing called the long run, which is like a kind of magical thing where you set something going and everything turns out brilliantly. John Maynard Keynes did point out that in the long run we're all dead, which is a slightly depressing concept. I'm going to be using the definition of the long run, which is slightly shorter than that, which is more convenient and more useful for you all. And also the fact that I use dead instead of very or really will really annoy my old English teacher. Not that she'll actually be watching this. I imagine she'll be reading Emma for the millionth time instead. I think we can all be creative. Everyone can be creative. It's just a matter of approaching the problem in the correct way. Accountants are very creative, of course. Unfortunately, their work isn't very sexy because they use numbers, although I would say it's considerably more sexy than Tracy Emin's quilt making, which is quite a tragic thing. I wanted to use a picture of her, but I shied away from that instead. Creativity is not some kind of jumping out the bath into the arms of a police officer kind of eureka moment. It's a process that takes time, and you can all nurture it, and you don't have to sit there and think, I'm not very creative. We can all be creative. Creative people have two basic things they do. One is they have an ego that allows them to keep hold of all their ideas and think, that's really valuable. That could be something brilliant at some point in the future. And they're also not entirely ashamed to steal other people's ideas. Although it's more really accreting ideas onto their own and making them much more important because that person was going to throw them away because they're not very creative. I call this whole process long-run kind of thinking, and it's basically how I operate. All my best ideas take about 5 to 8 years to come to fruition. And this example is a classic case in point. Years ago, a friend of mine said that lizards make the best pets for kids because if you want to play with them, you put them in a hot room and they run around a lot. If you get bored of them, you put them in a cold room and they go to sleep. It's good logic. And then I was at a party, and somebody who was only slightly less drunk than me had this idea of crossing a lizard with a dog. And they didn't realize how good this idea was, but I did, obviously. So, I've taken that idea. There are problems. There are design problems with the lizard dog, of course, because dogs jump into cold rivers. And I'll leave you to imagine how disastrous that would be. And sad, quite tragic, really. And then someone told me that they'd seen a miniature horse, which wasn't really miniature, it was about that big, but they called it a miniature horse. But regardless, in my head, I went, miniature horse, it's about this big. It's a miniature lizard horse, in fact, now. And this thing, it runs around my desk, it's fantastic, it's cantering away, and I get bored of it, and I put it in the minibar, which I don't really have under the desk, but I like to pretend I've got one. It's got champagne in, and I used to celebrate all the time. And it was well sat at my desk that... and looking at it and going, God, this keyboard's filthy and it's got crisps and everything in it. I thought, what if the lizard horse ate dust? Now I don't have to feed it and everything gets dusted. So at this point, I've obviously got the best Christmas present in the world ever on my hands. Barbie's never going to sell any once the miniature lizard horse goes onto the market. It lives off dust. Don't forget that part. That's very important. So I thought I'd actually put some thinking into it. And I did think, well, what if this thing actually only lived for a certain length of time, maybe just shy of Christmas? That would be great, because nothing consoles a kid more when they lose a lizard horse than getting a new lizard horse. And I did think about putting a chameleon tongue on this make-believe invention, but I think that's a bit creepy, although it would be able to dust in really hard-to-reach places. Very convenient. It'd get fat, though, because it wouldn't move around a lot. It'd just shoot its tongue out. Now, obviously, this is a really ridiculous idea and technically difficult to make, but it is a very rounded piece of design. And all I had to do was sit around for years, pondering lots and lots, and I just kept it ticking over in my head. And this is what creative people do all the time. They just tick ideas over in their head, they look for things to steal and add to their own idea. That's a terrible thing to say, but it's true. And then, of course, you have to look for an opportunity to actually use this idea, which is partly why I'm here. So if anybody does actually know a mad scientist, tell them to get in touch with me on Twitter. That would be fantastic. Cheers.